All right. Let's get started. So what we're going to do is we're going to start getting into a little bit of more onto some of the basic concepts. So we're going to cover 4 things in terms of context today, and then we're going to dive into some additional tools. So as a quality assurance person, you will not be doing a lot of programming, but there will be, as you build the automation scripts, you should be comfortable reading through it. Also, a lot of you will be testing a lot more web applications. So when somebody gives you, like it's in web applications, you should be able to look through some of that and identify if there are any kind of high-level issues or not, right? So it's just getting the broader understanding is where you're going to need some of these things. So we're going to start with like it's a basic programming concepts, right? So when you look at certain code, what does it mean to you, right? Nobody's going to expect you to write the code, but as you go through it, you will see it, how things gets laid it out. Okay, so let's look at the structure of a programming code. Okay. Let's see if it's a whiteboard is already up. Where my whiteboard is not good. There it is. All right. So when you look at any program, what you're going to see it's my thickness. So, when you look at any software program, it is usually like it's kind of broken down into certain things where you would say you're going to have some sort of indication which says that it starts the block. Then you will have an optional things called the variables. And I'll talk in a moment. Then you're going to have an execution block. And then finally, you will have something which indicates the end of the block. Okay. So most of the program structure, we're going to see it in no matter which language, it's going to fall into this category. Okay. So when you do a start, essentially indicates whether the entire program or a block that you're going to get ready to start it. Then just like it's, if you use a calculator, right? So it has an M plus RM button, right? And M minus, which essentially allows you to temporarily store certain information while you're performing calculations, right? Same concept in the programming language. The variables are, think about it as a temporary storage things that allows you to hold certain information while you're executing certain program. Okay. And then execution blocks are essentially, it is the logic that is kind of executed for the program. And the end part, it essentially indicates that, hey, I'm done with this block. Okay. Most of the language, it's going to follow this one. So when you look at it, right? So here's an example. Okay. So here is a simple program structure. It's in 2 different languages. When the top one is known as a transact SQL. So it's a programming language you will do it to manipulate the databases. directly the information on the databases. And the bottom one is also a code, like it's what you will see it in a Java or a C# language. Okay, that's what most of the developers kind of use it to build enterprise-grade applications. So in this one, when you look at this create or replace procedure, this is essentially a declaration in terms of identifying what is the name of this block is. So if somebody wants to execute this block from some other program, it says that this is how I'm going to name it. And the name is hello world. Okay. So the create or replace procedure allows you that, hey, I'm going to name the block and the name is the hello world. Okay. And then it just creates, it's a block of the execution code. So begin is the entry point or the start of the program, as we talked about. The other thing we mentioned, variable is optional. In this case, they don't need any variable. Okay. Then the print hello world is an execution block. In the end, it's essentially indicate that my program is over. Okay, so this is the simplest version with just one piece of execution code. And all it does it prints hello world on the screen. Okay. Same program, if you write it in a Java or a C#. Hello world here is the name of the block. Okay. And within that name, have a method call, and then there is an execution code. So both of this forms execution code. This is the main block within that hello world block. This is my starting point for the main block. This is the ending point for the main block. This is the starting point for my hello world. This is the ending point for my hello world. So you can see it, you can nest the program blocks. Okay. Same way. Here's the another one detailed example. Okay. In this case, the name of the block is my example. Okay. Here is where you have a optional variable. Right. So it's saying that, hey, I'm going to have two optional variables, one called age, another one called middle initial. The age is of type int, which stands for integer. And the middle initial is just one character long. Okay. Then I have a start of the block. And here is the end of the block. Okay. In this case, my execution code is 4 instructions. The first one is setting the value of age, which was I've defined the temporary variable as 21. Second one is setting my middle initial as K. And the next two, it's kind of printing that information on the screen. The first one says, I am. And then it says that like it's whatever the age is, put that in and says I'm years old. So this is the way that you can change the value dynamically, right? So if you have a computation around it to determine certain things, then you can use that and then print it. One example, you did the loan calculator, right? So based on input, it'll be computed and then it gets displayed to you. Think of something similar, right? The compute things gets inserted when you want to display it. Same thing with my middle initial is middle. Okay. Similar way, if in the Java, my example is that. Okay. In Java, everything it's kind of has to be within the method. That's why you see its second block main, just like you saw it in the previous page, right? So this is the main, and here is the beginning of the block, and here is the end of the block for that main. Okay. And it's doing exact same thing. Just a little bit of variations on how you define the temporary variables. In my SQL or T-SQL, you define the variable followed by what is the type of that is. In Java, it's the flipped way around. You define something as integer and the name of that variable. String and then the name of that variable. But it's performing same thing, right? It's setting the age, middle, initial, and using those two to print. Any questions on just simple basic? It's as you go through it, right? You now, if somebody presents you the code, you can just get a high level idea. Hey, what is it trying to do? It's trying to do all these instructions.
Are those the, just like as an example, are these the only like languages that are used to create the database, or those are like, what are the?
There are other languages, right? But most of the languages is going to follow the similar path, similar structure. Okay. They are more or less same. It's Transact SQL. It's a more standardized SQL. SQL is like it's kind of Oracle's version on top of it. But all of them follow what we call as SQL 9095 standards. Okay. Then whenever you're performing any computations, which computer program is nothing but some sort of computation, right? It's taking some input, performing computation on it, and producing an output. You need certain operators, right? So like it's even when you do it mathematical calculator, right? You have addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, all those operators. So some of the common operators you're going to see it. One of them is a Boolean operator. Okay. What it means is that whenever you execute this sets of operators, you're going to get the results as either true or a false. Okay. And there are three Boolean operators. Okay, they are known as AND operator, OR operator, and NOT. Okay, so AND is inclusivity. So if I would say, hey, I'm 5 years old and I'm a boy, right? So that's kind of an inclusive. So if I'm a 5-year-old boy and then I try to execute those conditions, it'll return me true. If I'm 15-year-old and a boy, one of them is not true, so it'll return you results as false. Okay. Or is either or, right? Either A is true or B is true. Then it'll return a true. And not is essentially gives you a reverse when something is not true. Right. So here's the table, right? So if you were using the high school math, right, and you have to prove certain theorems, they will ask you to do the all operators, right? So this should be fairly familiar, right? If it's upper caret, it's always AND in mathematical formula. If it is a lower caret, it's OR condition, or if it's a horizontal line, then it's a NOT.
Curve,
that's a tilde. That's approximation. The curve is approximation.
No, instead of like the short page, we used to do a union or intersection.
Yeah, but that's a union or intersection.
Yeah.
That's a little bit different than the operators.
Okay.
Right? So union is inclusive set, intersection is exclusion, right? This is still a Boolean conditions. Okay, so that's a set definitions. This is the calculation definitions. Okay, and then same thing in a SQL, you will see a word AND. Then that's an operator, or and not. In a C# or a Java, which is the other language you saw it, if you want to do an AND, it will be an ampersand, or will be the two horizontal, two vertical bars, and the NOT is exclamation mark. Okay, and then the other programming language you will see it in some of the automation tool is the Visual Basic. Visual Basic follows a similar thing as a SQL for most Boolean operators. Then the next set of operators is essentially comparison sets of operators. Right, so it talks about like it's equal, not equal, greater than, less than, all of those kind of things, right? So as you can see it, as you go through it, all of these things, it's essentially identifies is the value in the left things. What is the relationship to the right one, right? in the result will still become a Boolean, right? Because it's always just, it's the comparison operators. Is this true compared to this? If it is true, then you will get a true. If it's less than that. So for example, if I put it for equality and I say it's my left-hand side operator, it's coming to 5, and right-hand side is the value of that equation is 5 or not, right? So if I do that, and if they both matches it, it's going to return me true. If they don't match it, then depending on what the value is higher, it'll either return it, depending on the language, it'll return -1 or a 1. Those kind of things. Okay. So here are the operators. Like you can see, it is fairly close mimics, right? Just, you don't have to memorize it, right? So as you go through it, you can just sort of reference, right? So it's, hey, if my left-hand side is less than right-hand side, then I will just return true for this particular operator, right? Because it's comparing it, is this or not. Okay. And then you will still have all those computational, like it's multiplication, addition, division. But sometimes the sense of those operators may not make sense, right? So you're going to see a lot more comparison and Boolean operator for everything. Okay. The other aspects, then once you go into the block, which is execution block, you're going to see it, what is known as a control statements, right? So going back to here, right? All of these things are nothing but control statements. They are like, it's telling you what to do it in the execution sequence. Okay. So one simplest way to think about it is all of my control is going to be sequential. So in this case, I'm going to execute first line, then I'm going to execute second line, and then I'm going to execute third line. It's in the same sequence. I'm not going to skip anything at all. Okay. So if you look at that block will have some sequential statements. Occasionally, you will see it a decision statement. Okay, so when I use the comparison statements, right, I can say, hey, if this condition becomes a true, then execute this, otherwise do this piece of code. In those cases, essentially, it block, like controls it, what sets of the code will get executed depending on what condition. Right. So not everything will get executed based on certain condition, only certain piece of code will get executed. Okay. One example that we talked about, right, is it may check it, hey, what is your user type? If you're user type administrator, then I'm going to give you access to everything. If it's a dealer user, then I'm going to give you access only to this small piece, right? At a high level, that's what you can think about it, the execution decision statements. And then the third set will be iterative, where I'm going to repeat the same thing over and over again for a certain period of time. Okay, let's look at each one of them, right? So in this case, so I have department 5 is a sequential. It's a first line of code. The next, it will execute this condition. Now, this is a decision statement. Right? I'm checking it if my value of the department is 5 or not. Because remember, this is equality operator. Right? So it says, is my left hand equal to right hand? Is it true? Then I'm going to go ahead and execute this statement. If it is not true, then I'm going to skip this statement and I'm going to do this else part. And I'm going to execute this. So when this entire block of the code gets executed, you will see it's only two, either this and this will get executed, or this and this will get executed. I'm sorry, not this one. This and this will get executed, right? Depending on what the condition is, but never will get all three executed. Same thing in a C#. It's a similar format, right? Here the equality is 1 equal sign. Here the equality is 2 equal sign, right? In this case, just 1 equal is assignment. In this case. Okay.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
The one who are going to be executed, the one who has the truth.
Oh, the only true will do it execute. If it is false, then the second part will get executed. So it checks the condition. If it's true, do this, else do the other part. Okay. Then we talked about the iterative loop. Okay. There are two types of iterative loops. One set is for loop. When I know I want to execute certain things only a predetermined number of time, then I'll use the for loop. Okay. If I don't know how many times I want to execute, but I want to execute based on certain condition, then I want to use the while loop. Right? So for example, you may have a simple logic, right? And it says, hey, one of the required fields for credit application is social security number, right? So I can do it, says, hey, I'm going to keep prompting user to provide me social security number till they actually provide a valid social security number. I don't know how many times it will take it. I'm going to keep pushing them, prompting them enough. Right. So then I will do it. I don't know how many times we'll live. But I know it will be in a condition that, hey, if the social security number is valid, then only I'm going to go out of this loop. Then I would use the while loop. Okay. Versus if I want to say, hey, there is going to be 3 different types of contact information I'm going to prompt them. One is home, mobile, and other. Then I'll use for loop because I know I want to do it only 3 times. Okay. So here's the example. Both the loops are performing exact same function, but it's the way that you determine, right? So in this case, I start with the value of I is 1. And then I say it's as long as the I is less than or equal to 10, go ahead and execute this statement. And every time you execute, increment the value of I by 1. Right? So it'll go into the loop. It says, hey, I start with I as 1. I'm going to print this. I come back. Is I 1 less than equal to 10? Yes. I'm going to increment it by 1. And I'm going to do this. So now my value of I is 2. We go back. It's 2 less than or equal to 10. Yes. I'm going to add 1 more to it. So I becomes now 3. I'm going to execute this. I'm going to keep doing that till this condition repeats it 10 times. But I know always because of this thing is defined, I will always be executed 10 times. Right? Versus if you look into the while loop, I'm setting the value of I and says while I is less than or equal to 10, keep executing this. Now, this thing here for the illustrative purpose, I said increment I by 1. But this could be very well be, hey, I'm like it's prompting user to provide that value of I, and whatever value of I user provides, it will keep executing it.
But the condition is already over there also, which mentions that I is less than or equal to 10.
Right. It just says that execute to that. Let's say it's instead of this piece, I have it as read I from user, right? So it will prompt you and you say, let's say if I say I is like it's 2, it will execute, right? The 2 is less than 10. The next time around, I just say it's, hey, I is 1. It is still less than 10, I'll execute it. It will never be sequential, right? Based on whatever the input I provided. And I may just like it's after 2, I said the value of I is 15 as an input. It'll go through it and say, is 15 less than or equal to 10? No, so it's going to break it up, right? So it'll execute only twice. Instead of for loop will always be 10 times. So this will be always be predetermined. So this is always a specific time, right? And this will be a condition based. Okay. Here, the condition is that because I'm telling it, do it 10 times. That's what it is happening, right? Because I have to provide somewhere it says, did I go through 10 times or not? Right. So this is providing that check.
So for one value that is given there, it's performing it 10 times. Is that what it is?
Right. Yeah. Okay. And then The while loop is essentially, hey, I'm going to keep reading it, I'm going to keep doing it till it meets this condition. It could be one time, it could be 500 times. Okay, any questions? So those are the minimum pieces of the construct on the programming language that you need to know. That like it's when you look at some code, about 99% of the code will contain those constructs. That's it. Okay. Now, let's go into something known as an HTML. Okay. So let's start talking about HTML. Okay. So before that, let me do this. Okay. So when you go to any browser, right, and you're trying to pull up any site, what all does it is the browser gets something known as an HTML, which is known as hypertext markup language. Okay, it's a language meant for browser to understand it, right? Just like as a human, we read whatever the language, whether it's English, Spanish, Indian, all those languages, right? We know what it means. Browser is nothing but a machine, right? The computer is reading that. So they need to figure it out, how to read certain things and make a determination whether certain things is going to be bolded, is it going to be italicized, certain things are going to be different color, right? Because when you go to a web page, it's not monotonous, right? It has some images, some different colors, different fonts, different typographics. So how does browser know? They know all those through something known as hypertext markup language. Okay, so let's first think about it like it's when you go to a website, what actually happens? And then we will drill down and say, okay, how do we create an HTML page for that? Okay, so let's give an example. Let's say I want to let's go to a given site. Let's say abc.com. Okay, so this is the new site, right, for the ABC channel. So they go, you don't know where the request, right? So from your browser, right? So this is your browser. So this is your browser. So you're it's opening it up into Edge or Chrome, type it into the URL abc.com and you hit enter, right? So it goes in some cloud or internet world, right? So this is my internet. Okay. And magically, it gives you the page, right? So it gives you all of the HTML page that then your browser goes ahead and displays it. Okay. What happens behind the screen? Okay. So somewhere out there, okay, there is some sort of physical machine. Okay. And let's say that physical machine is called XYZ. Okay. And it has something known as an IP address, which is nothing but a set of now it's a 2-digit characters, right? It's if you look into it sometimes, it'll say it's 192.1. something like that. That's nothing but an IP address, right? So there's a whole, that's a language and a code that you go through it of how the network writes it. Okay, but in a nutshell, when you put the request to abc.com to internet, it has something called a huge routing mapping tables. Okay, so what it will have an entry called ABC. It'll have this XYZ, and it'll have the IP address of it. Okay, so it will say, hey, this is the server. A lot of times this is an optional field. Now there you just get it only the IP address. Okay, so they say it's abc.com, map to this IP address, let's say 192.8.7.16. Something like that. Okay, so it picks up that and says, oh, this request needs to be sent to this IP address. Think about it like it's right. When somebody writes a letter to you, right? It has the state, the city, the zip code, and a street address, right? So it's 4 pieces, and then it says, oh, this is how I need to map it out, where the letter, right? Because the postman or USPS looks at it, oh, as soon as they see the address, they exactly know where to send it. This is what that address is in the routing table, right? So the request goes to a router, which looks up this table and says, oh, this request needs to go there. So they send a request to here. Okay. This is something known as a web server. Okay. They said, hey, what is the IP address of that web server? Within that, they will have an application called ABC. Okay, which similarly maps to this thing. Okay. So it goes and says, oh, this request needs to go to this application. Okay. Now, a given web server can have multiple web applications. Okay, so this one is a web application. Okay. Now, this web application has a collection of something known as a web pages. Right, so these are my web pages. Okay. And one of the web page is a special web page called home page. Okay. So if I don't specify anything, and if I just say it's abc.com, it takes it by default and says, oh, you're going to give you the home page. So they're going to go to this home page. You're going to take the content from here, which is in an HTML page, and returns it back. And that return value then comes back to you. In your browser does it then. Let's say you're in there, and then it says, hey, you know what? I want to click onto the sports page. So there will be something on here that you click on it. And what you will notice is the URL, then it will change something like abc.com/sport. Okay. Then it says, oh, you want to get the sports page? So there will be a new request will be sent with this entire address. Okay. It will traverse and says, oh, I need to go to the abc.com. So it'll go to deliver to that. Now, at this point, instead of like it's doing homepage, it says, oh, I need a sports page. So let's say this is the sports page. It says, oh, I'm going to pick this page and I'm going to give you, and then that's what gets displayed. Right. So this web application essentially says, do you have anything additional information in the URL that tells me what you wanted within the application? If nothing is provided, they will pull up the home page and says, your first time coming to the page. Let me get you the home page to get started. Right. So if you look at the rflown application, right? So when you type in that URL at the top, it's end with a slash, there's nothing after that. It says, I'm going to display the home page. Once you log in and click a login, you will see that URL, something else gets added to it. Right. So it just says, oh, you came to the home page based on a login logic. You are a dealer. So let me get you a dealer homepage and send you, and then it updates the URL with that. So that now it gets displayed in that. And if you're taking any action, it just adds to that URL and just keeps building on it. So it knows how to navigate within this thing. Okay. Does everybody understand the basic construct, how the web application works? Right? So all you have to worry about the terminal, like this is your browser. This is the web server, web application, and web pages. The 4 levels of things. And between those 4, more or less, if you can get the entire traversal route for the application. Okay, any questions? Okay, so that's what the site. We talked about the web server. Then the website is nothing but a web application. Right, so when you go to cnn.com, abc.com, rflon.net, all of those are nothing but a website. Within that, they have a pages. It's essentially a lot of times you can map a 1-to-1 HTML page into your disk, physical disk to that. And the home page is always the first time. Okay. So now let's talk about how do you build a website? Okay. So typically, before you're building a website, a lot of times the development team does it something known as an information architecture. So they try to understand is what is the purpose of the website? How do you want to logically group the information together or functionality together so that people can access it and becomes more logical, right? So they always think about it. What is the content you want to put in the web? So I give you an example of abc.com, right? Which is much more informational site, right? So if you go to it, you can click on the video links, click on the news, all those things. But there is nothing that you can put a lot of information. Versus if you go into, let's say, amazon.com, right? It's not as simple, right? So you can pick and choose items. You can order certain things. You can put the review comments, all those things, right? So your experience and the purpose of why you will do an abc.com versus amazon.com, it's going to be 2 different things, right? So that's what we're talking about. What sort of information you want to put it out? One is informational, the other one is a retail commerce. Then you set the goal. What do you want the user to do it? How you want them to interact with that or consume the information? Okay. So if you go to the abc.com, right, they may kind of organize it. Hey, I'm going to give you news. I'm going to give you sports. I'm going to get you a science type of things. And then I'm going to give you a whole bunch of shows. And I'm also going to give you the ability to click on the local or the region of the world. So you organize your content, how I want to group it together. So if I go in Amazon, right? So they will say, it's, hey, I want to be able to look at the products. I want to be able to view the orders. I want to set my profile, right? Or I want to be able to do something else, like it's kind of reviews or raise a complaint or something like that. Okay. Based on that content organization, you come up with a general structure of pages and topics. So if you look into the design document for the RFlow, right? One of the last pages on the design document was the structure, how the pages are laid out. That's what you do. Okay. And that essentially allows the developer to say, okay, now this is how I'm going to map the whole site. Here is how the user is going to navigate through it. When they come in here, if they click this action, it's going to go to this page. If they do this, I'm going to display this page. Okay. So now, once they decide what pages and how the page of the structure is, then you go into it, okay, how I'm going to build that page, right? And that's where the HTML comes in. That's a hypertext markup language, right? It's telling browser what to do and what props to use, right? So whether image, changing the font, making it a bold, making a different color, and so on. And the way it does it is through the series of tags that are integrated into the text document. Okay, so let's look at it. What are the tags? Right. So tags, think about it. It's a instruction that tells the computer or browser to do it. Start doing this. Stop doing that. Right. So it's a on-off tags. Think about on-off switches. Okay. So the tags, the way the tags are defined in HTML is that they are within the angular brackets. So anything which is kind of put into the angular bracket is essentially becomes a tag. So here's the example of the tag. There are 2 tags. The first one tells a browser that anything following that tag needs to be bolded. Okay. The second tag says, if I do this tag, anything follows that, just make it italicized. Okay. So that's how the tags works. There's that switch. Okay. Now the switch comes in pair in HTML. The on and off. The way you distinguish it, the on is just a normal tag, and the off is when it starts with a /. So in this case, right, the text, this particular word will get bolded. Anything before that and after that, it will not be bolded. Okay. So when you can think about it, this is a pair, right? On switch and off switch. However, there are certain exceptions within HTML that doesn't require a pair. For example, paragraph, the new paragraph. Okay. BR is a line break, right? So when you're finishing and you want something to display in the next line, you just insert a line break. LI is nothing but a list item, right? So there are certain characters or certain tags within HTML that comes by themselves. It doesn't have a pair. Okay. Any question on the tags before we start seeing any examples?
What is BR?
Line break. That's a BR, is a break.
But if you don't want to list any more items, shouldn't there be a stop for that?
So we'll get into that in a moment. Okay. So another characteristics of tags is that they can embed it, but it has to be properly nested. Okay. So there is a terminology. It's kind of used in a computing world called LIFO. Last in, first out. Right. So when you're thinking about nesting, you keep adding things on top of it. Whichever the last one you added has to come off first. Then whatever next you added needs to come off, right? So in this example, right, I put two nestings, head and title. Okay. So if I use the last in, first out, so think about it, I added head. Then I added next one is the title. And if I need to first out was last in, I have to get the title out first, right? So this is on for title. There's to be off for the title first, then off for a head. So this is the right order. Right? However, if you look in this text, they both are in the same order. So the parser will essentially give you error message. Like, hey, you know what? I can't determine, right? So the results will be unexpected in terms of it will not display the way you expected it. Okay. So the correct order is last in, first out. So just remember, like it's, and you will see it a lot of times when the you're like it's trying to bring up a web page to test something, and the web page will look all funky, right? And you can say, okay, let me look at how this HTML was generated. And you will notice that somewhere, some of the tags are off from this rule called last in, first out. Okay. Another rule for the tags, it's not case sensitive. That means if I do it like something like this, in a case, it is same thing as this. Same thing as this. Okay. In addition to just the basic tag names, certain tags will have something known as an attribute. Okay. Let's say if I want to let's create a paragraph, but I want the paragraph to be central aligned, right? So like it's instead of everything left aligned, I want everything to be center aligned. Then you can just say, hey, this is the paragraph. and it has an attribute called align, and the value for that is center. So that means I'm going to center all. Okay. Again, those attributes are also predefined. That means I can pick and choose and create my own attributes or own tag. In HTML, everything is predefined. So I can use it, anything as long as it's in that list. Okay. So the key thing is as you go through it, make sure you're using the tags that are predefined. Anything that is not predefined will give you an error message in the browser rendering. Another important part, and this is where thing comes in. Remember when we talked about the different types of tests? One of the tests I talked about is compatibility test. To say, hey, is your application works in this browser, and this browser? The reason is because all the browsers don't support all of the tags. Like Microsoft have defined some additional tags that's used only in the Edge that won't work in a Chrome and vice versa. Okay, so that's why you want to be finishing it, those compatibility tests as part of your query assurance. Okay. Now, similar to that, right? What I talked about, somebody asked, it's what is the difference between T-SQL and SQL? HTML also has a standard. So as long as all the application that you build it follows only those tags and not a browser specific tags, it'll work on every browser. Because every browser is required, if they say it's, hey, this supports HTML5, which is one of the standards, then you know that everything that is defined in that browser supports and understands how to render. Okay. So that's that. Let's take an example. Okay.
I don't similar XML tags. For me, it looks like-
Hold on to XML yet. We're talking about HTML only. We'll come to XML later.
Okay.
Okay. So one step at a time. Let's just understand the HTML and then we'll compare with something else. Okay. Any questions on the tags before we do that? Okay. So let's actually build the page instead of doing this. Okay. So the way you build the page is you can get any of the text editors. Okay. And I'll keep it simple. I'll just do a notepad. Okay. Similarly, if you're using Mac, I think there is a note application that you can bring it and save it, the files around that. Okay. So I'm going to just create a simple notepad. And I'm going to start typing it the HTML tag in text, right? So let's say if I want to do something like this thing, which says I want to just build a simple page. Okay. So first I need to tell that, hey, this is an HTML page, right? So I'll do this. Okay. Then I will just say it is a head, right? So that means it's going to do a body for the header. Okay. And I'll talk in a moment what the header is. Okay. And then I want to say it's what do I want to not name the page? Right? Let's say I want to name this page as this is my first HTML page. Okay. Then this is the title, right? So I need to end the title. Remember the on-off switch? So I turned on to say what will be the title text. Now I want to turn it off. So the way I'll turn it off is by saying the same thing, right? Then I'm going to just say that's all I want in my header information. So I'm ending my header. Okay. Then I want to say it's going to be the main page. Okay. So I can just say hey, this is my main page. This is the body. And I want to say Let's say this is the body that I want to put it in. Okay. Let's say that's all I want to do it. Okay. So I did the body on off switch.
You're starting off by stopping HTML.
Yeah.
It's good. I was just saying is how many of you are paying attention, right? So it's good. So what do I have to do now? I want to end it, right? And I need to change my first tag to be an on switch, not an off switch, right? So we'll do that. Okay. So now let's check it. Did I apply the LIFO principle? Right. So I have HTML. This is the first one started. Is that the last one? Yes. Then I started head. Is the head finished before HTML finished? Yes. Okay. Then I added title under head. Is the title ended before the head ended? Yes. Then I added a body. And the body ended before HTML ended. Yes.
Yeah.
So it looks like I'm applying the right rules, right? So now I have to essentially save it, right? So this is, I haven't saved the minor file, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just say, I'm going to save. Okay. It's going to prompt me where do you want to save it. Let's say I want to do it in the same page, like same folder that I've been using, right? Now this is an important. I want this to be an HTML page, not a text page, right? So the document type, I'm going to change that to all files. Okay, so it's going to show me everything in there. And I'm going to do this is I'm going to call it a first page. Okay, dot HTML. Okay, so I'm calling it that this is the first page. So if I call it anywhere by going to it, it's not a text page, it's an HTML page. How do I know it's an HTML page? If you look at it, I associated my HTML pages to that. So this is what the page I just saved it. Right. Now let's say I want to see it in a browser. How do I see it? Okay. So there are two ways. You can either just double click on it, right? And I'll try to open it and says, hey, it's an HTML page. And I have a browser application associated to open all of the HTML type of pages, right? So I'll go there and says, do you want to open with the Google Chrome? I said, yes. It's going to display that. Now notice two things. What did we put into the body? This text. What did we put in the head? This is my first HTML page, right? So let's pull it up side by side, right? So this is my first HTML page. This is what got displayed. Okay. So let's say I want to make it simple and call it first page. Okay. And then all I'm going to do is save. So now my file is there. All I have to do is refresh it to load it. Notice that. Okay. Let's say if I want to go ahead and change some of the text and I want to call this as a bold italic, right? So I can do that by going in here and say, I want to do a B, right? And let's say, remember I said it's case insensitive. So this B is going to map to that. And let's say I want to add an italicize also. Okay. Now, can I put it here? Why not? It should go before, right? Because last in, first out. Okay. So now I'll do that. Good catch. Closing tag. Right. So I'm going to do its file, save. And I'm going to do this. Now see it's a bold and HTML. Okay. Yes.
Usually if it's a body, we put a period, right? So we have to, it doesn't.
Yeah, it's again, it will display, it's a dumb. Whatever I type in is what it's going to display. Right. So let's say if I remove the italicized tag, right? Now look what happens. right? It says, hey, it was never ended. Right? What happened here? It's unpredictable, right? I don't know what will end where because it didn't form it, but it still tried to make a sense of whatever it could and displayed everything. It says that, hey, you know what? You told me to start the here italicized. You never told me to finish it. So I'm going to keep doing it. I never finished it. You told me to do the block, So I'm going to do that. But there's no guarantee that everything else will work as expected. So that's what you're going to see sometimes, right? You bring up an application page and says it doesn't make sense. Shouldn't this be on the next page instead of that, right? So let's say if I do it, a line break here. So watch what happens, right? And again, this white space doesn't matter. So in other words, let's say if I do this, right? And I remove this line break. Okay, this is how it is, right? Look how it gets displayed. It doesn't matter how many white spaces you did it for this. So you can always format this to make it more readable, right? So let's say if I do it like this, and say it's more easier for me to essentially kind of map it, right? And let's say I can do that. Right, so now I can do this. Say I want to do this. Okay, so now it's an easier readable, right? I can quickly match it. Did this and this match? Did this and this match? Did this and this match? This and this match? Yes, I'm good. Right. But again, this is for your readability purpose. When you look at this, the way it displays, because machine doesn't care what you did, right? All it just says when the tags are turned on, when the tags are turned off. That's all it does. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Here's what I want you to do. Okay. You saw the whole process, right? How did it? I want you to create one HTML page yourself. Just go ahead and create your first HTML page. Just make a title for it, write something in the body, and do that. Let's do it now. Pause. So let's say if you accidentally close the notepad, okay, you can still get to it. Like you can go to that page and right click on it instead of double clicking it, and it'll open up and says open. And there's another option, open with. You go open with. If you don't see a notepad here, you can say choose another app and scroll down, pick the notepad, or you click on the notepad, then it'll open up with the notepad. And then you can go ahead and edit it. Okay. Did everybody successfully created an HTML page?
So I got a question here. So what should be the final result after creating it? What should I see on my screen?
So you go ahead and double click on the page, wherever you saved it, you double click on it, and that should bring it up a browser page, and that's where it is shows. Okay, so that's what if you did not save it as an HTML page, it will show up like this text document. So when you click it, it will not open up into your browser. So make sure it is saved as .html file. Okay. You had a question? No, save that as an HTML page, and you cannot have a space in it. Click on it. Yeah. All files. Okay. You end this with .html. You cannot have the space. You got to give the name. Yeah. Just give it like it's my first page, all one thing. You have two spaces. After mine, you have space. After first, you have space. You cannot have space. Remove the space. Yeah, so you can say my first page.
When you save as.
That's what I'm saying.
No, when you save.
Dot
HTML.
HTML.
Can you go to the
Click save. Okay, remember where you capture this is the document. Click on it. Okay, now there's no text. Remember what I said, you have to use the tags. Look at that. This one has all the tags. Right, just type in that and save it. Yeah,
Right.
not the tag. Remember it's an HTML tag. You have to do it. So go ahead and type exactly like this. And I'll give you the HTML.
That's fine.
Okay. Good.
We did it right. There you go.
Would it save the file That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the file?
Mm.
Open it and browse. Show me the text.
You have like a save as or anything?
You can say it's fine. Save it.
Yeah, now this is that.
No, it's just open.
No, you don't have it. That's what you say, right?
Yeah. The problem is it's saved as a not TXT and so you send me an email, what do you have?
I may have to look at it and see if the text edit that you use does it allow it to another. It may just be for them. Okay. Okay. All right, so let's move on. So you understood how to create a basic HTML page, right? What I would kind of recommend is go experiment with the different tags and everything and see how it works. What kind of error it gives, just like what I showed you that. Okay. Now, this is like what we talked about, is just kind of showing only the plain text, right? But when you're doing it forms, right? You need to be a little bit more advanced for allowing user to enter the information, right? So HTML has additional tags in addition to the basic tags, right? Okay. So, but before we go, right, I've kind of showed you the head and the body, right? So think about it, the title and the way the HTML gets organized, right? So it always has, the HTML page has two, I would say it's the components within that. One is called head. Okay. All the information in head does not get displayed on the page itself. It's used as the metadata. So like, for example, you saw in the header file on the tab, right? That's what can use it. Also, you will see a lot of times it's used to do additional computing or build certain tables, which is then used by an actual body. Like, for example, like it's in many places, right? When you see it's a drop-down list, right, for all the state, they may just say, hey, you know what, here's the list of states. And within the body, they will call that functions, right? That's more advanced HTML, but that's how the head uses it. Think about it, head uses all of the document properties and a metadata. Okay, versus body contains what is going to be actually displayed, right? So what will be displayed in the browser? Okay, that's all the content will be in the body. Okay, there are certain rules that you cannot use more than certain tags into the head, and you can use as many tags as you wanted within the body. Okay, so you can do it like as we talked about the line breakup, the center, the header pages, and so on. Okay. Now, if I want to enter something in it, then I use what is known as the data controls. Okay, so you will have an input tag, and then it'll have the appropriate attributes, right? In this case, I want an input type with text, so it will display something like this, where you can enter the text. Okay, then you can do it also a drop down. So for drop down, you can use the select option. It says, hey, I'm going to display a whole bunch of options, select from that, and what will be each of the option values is going to be. Okay. Also, when you enter certain things, right? Sometimes you have a button, right? Think of a login button on your Rflow page, right? So you have two fields where you enter user ID and a password, and then you have a button where you can click it, which does it. So this thing becomes a button, which says, hey, I want to input, but the text type is the submission. So I'm going to click on it to submit things. Okay. Similarly, you can do a radio button, right? So here it's an example. I'm going to just show you. Here, first I will show you in here. Okay. So here's my text input. All right. Here's my drop down. Here's I can do a radio button. I can click on submit. Okay. So what if I want to see it, what it looks like, right? Here's what it looks like. Okay. Here's your input type. And the reason why you see it like table is I've created table with row and data because I wanted it to be aligned. So if you look at it, right, this is very well aligned. Almost think about it, it's like this is aligned, right? So my form looks neat and clean. The way I did it is I created a table with the two columns and multiple rows, right? So this is one column, this is another column. Here's one row, two row, right? So that's the way you do that is through the table, right? And I said, this is a row, and within the row, this is the data column. Okay. So all of those values, so here is the drop down. Okay. Now notice that here's something that you will see it's a lot more often. Developers tends to cut and paste a lot of things. In this case, they said, hey, I'm going to display a Columbus option. When user selects that, here is the value that you want to pass it back. Look, they did a cut and paste, so they changed here, but they did not change. So in reality, when I submit this form, irrespective of what I select as the city, it will always set city as a Columbus. Right. So here's kind of example as a QA. when you say, hey, this thing doesn't seem right, you can just open it and say, what is going to be there? And the way you do it is in the browser. If you do a right click, okay, there is going to be an option called view page source. If you click on it, it will show you actually what is the HTML that generated that page. Right, so here, look at that. Right, so you don't need to access to the actual HTML page. As long as you have access to the browser where it's got rendered, you can view the source code and say, hey, developer, and you can flag this as part of it. The reason why it's accepting it like this, because you see it, the value not set properly. So that when a developer looks at that bug, they said, oh, I know what it is. Okay. Similar way, you can use images, right? Because a lot of times there's images comes in. You can use the links, right? There are different tags that you can use it for each one of them. So for image, you're going to use it, the image, you identify where the file names are. Same thing with the href, that. Okay, that's all about the basics of HTML that you need to know. Now there is a very good source. And okay, so if you go to w3schools.com, okay, it is a very good site. What I would recommend all of you to get familiar with a lot more about HTML, and you can say, hey, I want to learn HTML. You click on that. It will walk you through everything, what all is available in class. I'm sorry, in terms of tags and everything. How do you create it? What can you use it, right? So here's HTML tables. You can click on it and says, hey, I want to create an HTML table. It will display what all. Here's how you can do that. You can do it. I want to try myself. It'll open up the code that you can mess with it here, right? You can change it and you will see it, everything here. Let's say I want to say it instead of company, right? Let's say I want to call a business name. Right? And I say I want to run. See it change here. So you can make the changes here to see it, how it behaves at right next to it. Okay. You can do it that for everything, right? So let's say I want to do images, right? We just talked about images. We'll tell you exactly how you pull example. What you do it, you can try yourself for each one of them. Okay. I want to change the colors. How do I go change the color? Everything. Right, so you can do a background color. See here. Right. So you can get yourself familiar with all of this text, and there are like it's kind of border color that you can put it, whole bunch of things you can do it. Okay. So that's about the HTML. Okay. Any questions before I move to the next topic? All right. So that was an HTML. Part of the reason is like anytime you test any of the web apps, that's what you're going to be doing with that. Okay. Now let's look at it. Another similar language called XML. Okay. So XML, it's essentially nothing but extensible markup language. Okay. So HTML was hypertext markup language. So this is also a markup language. The only difference is in HTML, you have everything was predefined. You cannot create your own tags, right? Extensible markup language, is the one where you create your own tags. Okay. So what is the key difference between those two languages? Right? We talked about HTML as a fixed set of tags, right? XML is variable. You can define your own tag. Okay. The whole purpose of HTML was to display it in the browser. Okay. The purpose of XML is how you organize your content, because you're creating your own tags, you're organizing your things. So it is kind of used it to content. Okay. It's also used for a data infrastructure. That content is nothing but your data. And you can use XML, pass through what is known as different parsers, and display in a different formats. Versus HTML, it's always a browser only. Okay. It doesn't have any data validation capabilities. So you just saw it, right? When I kind of just did the input type, I could define what I wanted, like Columbus, right? There's no validation. XML, you can define the rule so that it forces your validation. Okay. So let's talk through it. How do I create an XML? Okay. It's a markup language, right? Same rule. It has tags. Start switch, end switch, start tag, end tag, and the data in between. Okay. Here's an example. Okay. Start tag, end tag, data in between. Only difference is I define my own tags. Okay. You can have whatever data you want to do, whatever tags, right? So here's an example. I use the same data, but two different tags, right? So this is, I'm trying to build a movie database, right? And the movies have a directors and they have actors, right? A lot of times actor and director is the same. The HTML, it was non-case sensitive. XML is case sensitive. So that means each one of those three city tags are completely different tags. Okay. Another aspects you can do it is you can abbreviate tag into HTML. Okay. I'm sorry, XML. So when you think about, right, I have a tag, start tag, end tag, without any data. So I can abbreviate that to be just called like this. So this tag method is equivalent to the start tag, end tag without any data. Okay. The only difference is instead of doing a slash at the beginning, I just did it at the end. So it's abbreviated. Okay. Okay. Attribute can also have associated with the tags. Remember, like we said, paragraph align equal to center. Align was an attribute, it had a value center. Same thing in XML. You can define attributes, and attributes are nothing but a name and a value pair. Okay, with the equal sign. For example, here's the city, right? All city has associated zip code. So I could just say, hey, the zip is equal to this. Now, two things to notice, right? Just like tags, you can define your own attributes. But the key thing is that the value should always be in the double quotes. So it's a name value pair. What is equal to is essentially assigns what is the value of that particular attribute, but it's always in double quote. Okay. Again, same thing as the nesting rules. What are the nesting rules? Last in, first out, right? So you can have the same way. Here's an example. Okay. Now, if you look at this, right? So there is a book. Now there is another rule that in XML, in a given XML file, right? You can have as many XML files as you wanted, right? Just like HTML files. But the rule is within a given XML file, you can have only one root node. That means only one at high level In this case, the books is high level. So I can have as many books as I want, but the books is only one. So it's a collection of books. That's the root level node. Okay, this is how it works, right? So think about it. In this case, the books has two books. One with the ID 123, the other one is with ID 555. Right? So this is how you can visually say that the information is gathered together. Right? So every book has author, title, and a year. Some book has only author and title. Right? So I don't have to specify in this case, what is the year? So if you look at it, right? So the book has author, title, year. In this case, only author and a title. Which is okay, right? Because you can say certain, like we talked about, right? If I put it a collection of XML into the credit application, right? Some credit application may have secondary applicants. Some credit application may not have. Similar concept here. Okay. Okay. Here's the authoring guidelines. When you're building an XML file, here are the few things that you need to keep with that, right? All element must have an end tag, right? Or if you're using abbreviated tag, right, must be end with a slash. Second rule is all element must be cleanly nested, which is last in, first out, right? No overlapping. Third rule is if you're defining an attribute value, they must be in a quotation. Okay. And the fourth rule is there's only one and one root node. Okay. So let's take a example, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do same thing, right? So in this case, instead of ending the file with HTML, you create the file ending with .xml. Okay. And then if I want to open, you can do it in a notepad. Okay. There's one thing you're going to notice that all XML starts within what is known as a parser tag, which is in this case, it's saying this XML is version 1.0. Okay. Then the books is the root node, the books, right? It has 3 books, right? Only one of them is a year. Author and titles are there for all of them, right? And then ID and a location is assigned as an attribute, right? Name, value pair. Value is in double quotes. Doesn't matter whether it's a number or a text, right? And location is not required attribute, right? So it's only ID there. Some may have location, some may not have location. Okay. So how will it look like it when I open it up? Okay. So if I double click on it, okay. Let me see if I can get zoom in. Can you see it? So when you double click it, it opens up into a browser, right? In this case, it's opened up into the Internet Explorer because I had assigned that. The advantage you can do it is you can collapse it now. You can see it. If you're like it's looking through the data and it says, hey, you know what? It's too much expanded. I want to just see it specific one node only. You can just see that. Okay. You can do it all the way to that. So you can say, hey, the root node is books. And it's that. Now, do you remember what happened when I missed an attribute in HTML? It still showed me a value, right? Didn't give me that. Now let's look at what happens if I do that within here. Let's say I forgot to do this books. Oh, not in the notepad. Okay, so if I do this, okay, I missed it. an attribute. And I'm going to save it. Right, and I'm going to refresh it. You see it? Clear difference? Now let's do another thing. I'm going to open up that file using Chrome. Let's say. Okay. So it gave me that, hey, even though it is kind of did this, it gave me a what is wrong. It kind of tried to give me that, say, hey, you know what? In your document on line 15, opening and ending tag mismatch. Okay, book line 12 and books does not match. Okay, so I go in here, right? And let me see. So let's look at that on line number 15. It says there is some problem, right? So I come to line 15, and then it says in the first column, it said this one is expected books. I'm sorry, this one is showing books. It was expected book. That's what it's telling me. Right, and it says the thing started on line number 12. So if I go to line number 12, it says this tag, which was started in 12, is mismatched. So it gives me more indication what was the problem, rather than just telling me that. Right. So always I would recommend use Chrome whenever you're messing with XML files. Right. And then I can just say it's, hey, you know what? If I just do a book, now that I fixed it, right, I'm able to go ahead. Did I say?
Flash is missing.
Oh, closing, right? So I accidentally did it in open. It should be closed, right? So it gave me an error message. Now, if I go back and fixed it, now it doesn't, right? So I can just go ahead and it's kind of do that. Okay. Same thing will happen if, let's say, if I change it. We talked about case sensitiveness, right? So if I do this, it'll give me the same error. Okay. So this helps you to actually walk through it and fixes it as you go through it, right? And you've noticed that the file type is XML, right? So that's how you go mess with XML. Okay, here's what I want you to do for homework. Okay. Okay, I want all of you to create an XML file. Okay, what does that XML file should contain? It should contain places you have visited in the last 5 years. Okay, for every place, I want you to month and year of the visit. Okay, place of the visit, who you visited with, right? So you could say, hey, I went with a family, I went with friend, I went on a business trip, right? Who all you went with it. Okay, in the site you have seen at that place, right? So let's say I went to the New York City, right? And I saw a Statue of Liberty, I went to Times Square, and then I went to the Wall Street, right? So those are the 3 sites that I visited. Okay. So I want you to think about it and create an XML structure with this pieces of information and send that XML file to me and Harshal by Thursday. Okay. Make sure you test it out, validate it, that it gets opened properly into the Chrome browser, meets all the rules, right?
I think they can create in W3 schools as well.
Yeah.
The same place. Yep.
Yeah, so here is the other thing, right? And let me see if I still have W3 schools. Okay, in W3 schools, just like you had an HTML, you can get an XML also. I want to learn XML. It will essentially walk you through everything. How to use. I would not worry too much about XML Ajax or DOM. Just do a basic XML. Okay, and it has also some of those things like it's a data definition. How do you force the rules, right? XSLT, it's essentially nothing but the translation. So how you take XML file and present into different presentation format. Okay.
But we still perform, do it in the notepad and then we send
Yeah,
it.
again, you can try it out here, make sure it's working. And then build an XML file and send it to us. Right? Or you can do it just like what I was doing. Just do it in Notepad, make the changes as you expect it, review it in Chrome. It'll keep giving you error message till you're able to get it to the right place.
So in XML, is there a way to define punctuations? Like if I need between the author, I need a comma.
Yeah, you can. It's all text. Anything between the two tags is text.
No, like I don't want to put it in the text. If I tag it on a book, it should have every.
So there you can do it in XSLT, which is essentially a transformation on that, right? The XML is a data. All it just cares is what your data present is what it is. So if you want to put a comma, right, that's you're talking about presentation aspect of it. That goes into XSLT.
So why isn't that there are some, like, for instance, in the XML example, you've written 1, 2, 3 in double quotation, but when the title California is not in double quotation.
You're talking about, it could be simple. It could be simple error. No, the California is not an attribute. It's a data value. ID is an attribute. The tag is book. Here, tag is title. This is the data value. Remember, attributes are the only one which requires a double quotation, not the text value within the attribute, within the tags. Right. So think about it. The ID is an additional information for the book, right? Versus title is one of the characteristics of the book.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is just a formatting why this one is black versus orange, right? So I can fix that. So this thing is. Okay. Any questions around XML? Here, this is HTML. This is not XML. Okay, let me go to the XML. Because it is part of the attribute. Look, right? Anything which is an attribute. Here the tag is the book. ID and the location is attribute. That's why it's in double quote. Remember the rules that we say? Authoring rule. All attribute value must be enclosed in quotation mark. Right? So this is the attribute, right? It's location. It's not the tag.
Not only numbers, so we can tag in.
Yeah.
So who decides on the attribute? Is it already a predefined, or we decide what is an
You
attribute?
decide an XML, you decide what do you want an attribute.
So if I want, I could put the location down.
Yeah, you could put
And it
simply
Doesn't
that.
have to be an attribute.
Doesn't have to be that.
So
It's essentially what you feel it is an associated information versus independent entity for that particular thing.
ID, the attributes that help us to search the particular thing.
Don't think about implementation. This is just purely data representation. When you go into the database, when you go into the presentation formats, you can define different rules. That's why it's an extensible, right? This is the information that I need to capture. When you go into DTD, there are rules that you can enforce it and says, hey, it must have this attribute and it must have this attribute type of thing. And then you run an XML and says, this XML matches the DTD or not. Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
You have to do all on Notepad. What you gave homework.
Yeah, you can do it on Notepad. You just think about it. Whatever the text editor use it, it's fine. Just do the homework. The Notepad is one of the most common one on the Windows machine. That's what I use it. Okay. Somebody has put thing in chat. So Mika, think about it. XML is essentially used it for the data. Remember example that I talked about the Amazon that you're performing a purchase and you need to send it to say, hey, is this credit card transaction to the payment gateway? You will send that information, right? Most likely that's going to be an XML. Harshal in a moment, it's going to show you one of the activity, what we call it about the making an API calls. Those are going to have an XML attributes in it. That's what it's typically used. Okay. If nothing, let's take 5-minute break. 10-minute breaks at 11 o'clock. We'll start with the next topic at 11 o'clock. Okay. First, I'm going to pause it.
Yep. So again, it is used for exchanging the data between systems. And it's a language independent, meaning it has its own format. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you can exchange data. So if one system is written in the Java programming, another one is written in the .NET programming or C#, you convert the data into JSON and exchange the data between various systems. Okay, you can do the same thing with XML. It's not language dependent either. Now, this is the example of JSON here. So XML has a root tag, right? So you have to have one tag which does not repeat, and it's a root tag. Basically, that's called root tag. Same way in the JSON, you have this curly braces. So this is called your root tag, and all the data that goes between that. Okay. So this is a very simple example, right here. So here you have the name and value pairs here. So this is my, you can call name as a tag. First thing is a tag, or which is in the, again, in the quotes. Then you have colon, and then you have the actual value, basically. Okay, then you have multiple tags, or if you want to specify multiple values, you have comma, and then you have age equals 30. And then you have 1 comma, car equals none. Now JSON, I'll show you in the next slide. You will find some difference here. Why the John is in the quotes versus 30 is not in the quote, null is not in the quote, and so forth. Okay. There is a reason for it. Because it's a JavaScript built on top of the JavaScript, and JavaScript has certain data types. Okay, so it supports certain data types in the JSON as well. So John, it's a string value versus 30 is a number value, numeric value. And this is a special data type called null or empty value. In the XML tag, if you have a tag, right, name tag, you don't specify anything, that's the empty tag. Here, if you don't want to specify something, you specify null. Basically, it's considered empty value. Okay, so that's the difference between some of the XML and JSON data structures. Okay, so let's see what it is. Okay, all right, I'm the right slide here. Okay, so as I said, it supports the data types. XML does not support data type. Okay, so that's the biggest difference between XML and JSON. Okay, so here it supports this the various different data types here. So obviously, string is a string. You have to have double quote basically for the strings. Now it supports a number data type. So in this example, 30 is a number. So you don't put quotes basically around the value. There is a special data type called object. Special data type called object. Okay. So what it is think of example of a car, right? It is basically you can consider it as an object which has certain properties, its own properties and so forth. It's a kind of like a common programming, object-oriented programming. Have you guys heard that terminology? OOPS, right? Oops. It's the same concept here. Everything you can create the objects basically, and objects are nothing but you assign certain properties for certain object basically. So that's what we have specified. This is how you can define an object. So I have an employee, and this has, so it's kind of like a grouping. You are grouping all the properties for certain object. Okay, so I have an employee created here. Well, this is the employee object, and all are the properties belongs to the employee basically. Okay, so this is part of the employee object. Okay, again, I'll show you one more example which makes it a little bit more clear. It's nothing but think it as nothing but grouping of a property so that you can easily reference in the code, programming code. Okay, that's what it is. So it's a special data type. Then you have an array data type. I don't know, any of you heard the term arrays in the programming world, but it's nothing but a list of values. It's a list of values. So I have this employee here is an array of 3 values. It's a list of 3 values. Okay. So John, Anna, and Peter. Now, how can you tell it's an object versus array? Right, because both have named employees. So you see the arrays are always in the square brackets, and objects are curly brackets. Okay, so that's how you can tell. Arrays are always in the square brackets, and objects are in the curly braces. Okay. So we looked at a string, we looked at number, we looked at array data type, we looked at a Boolean. Boolean is nothing but true or false, right? True or false. I think you guys saw in the programming earlier as well. It's a true or false. Something is true or something is false. Okay. And finally, the null value or empty values. You have, if you are defining a null value, then you have to specify null word. Okay. You can't just leave it after colon, you don't specify it. No, that's not how it will throw you an error for parsing. Okay, so there are 5 different data types. How many we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. So 6 different data types supported by JSON object. Any question on this particular slide? Yeah.
So when you say string, is it just a random text? Which
Yeah,
comes in,
anything. Yeah.
quotations?
Yep. Anything you can put ABC.
It
Okay.
can be numbers also.
It can be numbers as well.
Okay.
Yeah, numbers 30. It will treat it as a string data type. Now, if you don't put numbers, then it will treat it as a numeric. Okay. Now,
Now, I have a question.
yes.
So when you say new, inside the bracket, you should leave it empty?
This one,
Yeah,
it's a null, and NULL.
I understand.
Yeah, that means it doesn't have a value. So middle name doesn't have a value in the JSON, basically that particular data structure. Okay, in the XML tag, you just leave it empty. You don't spell, you don't put anything. In XML, you just say name starting tag and then ending tag. Okay, there is nothing here in the middle. That's how you can specify XML. Okay, but here we have special data type for empty value. Okay. All right, any other question? Okay, let me move on. So this is let's see here, see if you guys can see it. Okay, so this is the JSON example at the top, right? This is the XML example. Same thing. I have data in the JSON versus I can do same way in XML. This is how you can same information, just a different data representation. Okay. So I have a root tag, right? Employees here. So this is a root tag. This is a root tag. Same way I have this curly braces starting and ending. Okay. Then I have an employee has an array. This is array. How can I tell? Because it's a square bracket. Okay. Here I have one record, second record, third record. So each item, each one, I have this first name, John, last name, and so forth. I could have done a little bit differently as well. Each employee object I could have specified and said this is so this one I could have written something like this as well. Okay, so starting, ending, I can say employee, and then I have this three different values would be part of that. Second employee. Okay, and then third employee. I could have represented that way as well. Okay, but here I'm representing in the array symbol. If I want to do as an object, I can say employee and whatever the values are, basically the same values I can repeat for each employee object. Okay. It's again, data remains same. I mean, just how you structure your data, basically. And then we'll see the example where actually we use this, right? And remember, you guys are not writing this from scratch. Okay, but you need to be able to read through it and interpret whatever data is coming out of this as a result from the services and so forth. You need to make sure that data is correct. That's what you are doing from the quality assurance standpoint. You are not writing anything from scratch. Okay, so that's a good part for you guys. Okay. All right, so just quickly highlight the difference here, right? With JSON versus XML. Both are JSON and XML are self-describing, right? You have name value pairs in JSON versus tags and the value in the XML, right? They both are human readable. They are hierarchical. You have tags within tags within tags. You can do that in XML. Same way in JSON, I can have my employees, and then I can have another employee object, and I can repeat that, and then I have name value pairs and so forth. So both are hierarchical, and they both can be parsed by a lot of programming languages, right? Both JSON and XML can be fetched within XML HTTP request, meaning you can use data transfer over the internet using the HTTP over the HTTP, basically calls. Okay. Now there is some differences between JSON and XML, right? So JSON doesn't use end tag. There is no end tag. It just have a name and value. What I mean by that? This is a name. This is value. There is no end tag. Basically, XML you have to have an end tag. JSON is shorter, right? You don't have end tag, so obviously it will make it shorter. It's quicker to read and write, and it's a special data types called arrays and objects and all those things. XML doesn't. XML doesn't support data types.
question. Is JSON is a case sensitive or it's not?
JSON is case sensitive as well.
Okay.
I believe, JSON case sensitive. Yes, I think.
Similar.
Yeah, case sensitive, yep. Okay. Now, there is one more difference. XML has to be parsed with the XML parser. Okay. JSON can be parsed by standard JavaScript programming or JavaScript. If you know JavaScript, you can easily parse that. There are built-in libraries for that. But XML, you need some parser to interpret the data. Or you can do it, both can be, I mean, you can programmatically, you can both formats are supported by programming languages, basically. Okay, any question on the JSON format? I just quickly went over. Hopefully that gives you some idea about JSON format.
I have a question. Can I ask?
Yes, go ahead, Rohini.
If you can go back to the JSON, the next, where you showed another alternative example.
Yeah.
So employee.
Yeah. Okay.
So the one that you typed, employees is an array, right?
No, that one is an object. So array is always with the square brackets. So this example here is with the array, but I can write the same example with the objects by going this out. Okay.
So this one has 2 objects here.
Yes, 2 objects. Yep, that's right. I can have a third one as well, as many as I want. I can repeat it. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question. In this example over here, JSON versus XML, I've seen that it says employees and it is in square brackets, and then we have the curly braces holding it.
Yes.
So it is in array, but at the same time, it's also holding the object.
Object. Yep. That is correct. That is correct.
So the way you interpret it, it's an array of 3 objects.
3 objects.
Okay.
Array of 3 different objects. Yep.
So you can have an array of even the other data that is available. You can have an array of strings also, or array of
no, these are strings,
numbers.
right?
We can have an array of numbers.
Yeah, so you can have numbers as well, like first name, age. If I had age value, then I can comma age 30. I can have, so this object will contain its own data structure generally, basically, because this is the whole thing makes up one object, one employee, right? Basically.
The only rule is arrays have to have all the same objects.
Same thing. Yep.
Same things. You cannot have an employee in book into a one array.
Right.
Right. You have all employees or all book.
Yep.
As an array.
Okay. As I said, nobody will create this from scratch, right? So you don't, but as long as you understand what are the different things, so that you can interpret what is the output coming out from the software when you are, and we will see that shortly, what type of data outputs you have to interpret and so forth. Okay. All right. So is everybody good? Then we can move on to the different topics. So that's the XML, HTML, and the JSON. Those are the important part. You need to be able to work with, you need to have some understanding of those 3 things. Okay. Do you have a question, Mike? Okay. All right, so let's talk about how we use this thing, right? JSON or XML, where does it apply in the quality assurance and testing, and what you need to do once you get familiar with those formats. Okay. So that's where the API testing comes in the picture. API. Okay. So let's come back here and see what is API testing, or what exactly it is, right? So I'm just gonna draw like a simple picture here. All right, so this is our flown. Okay. This is our flown basically site or application here. Now, think about if I'm a user and I'm sitting on my laptop, I have a browser, and I'm interacting with my application. Okay, so here, when I'm doing basically typing the URLs and other things, what type of things are being served back to me? Those are HTML pages, right? HTML pages. Okay, so it doesn't matter. There is one user or 50 users, they will all, whenever they make a request, they are interacting with our flow with the HTML, pure HTML. So HTML is generally used whenever there is a user interaction happens. Okay, so that's where the HTML is used for user interaction and the browser-based interactions. Okay. Now let's assume, not assume, there is another system called, or let's say there is a real bank or financial system. Bank. So the Rflown is actually, instead of sending the email, in our case, we are sending notifying and somebody logs into the Rflown, right? That's a scenario we have. But assume the credit application data flows from Rflown to the bank. And bank, whichever bank it goes, some other user looks at the data and approves or rejects the credit application. Okay, so it's a hypothetical scenario. Okay, it's a hypothetical. So assume our data, credit app data, goes to this bank, right? And then this bank, basically whoever is sitting at this bank, here there is another user or lender is looking at this data, and they will say approve or reject credit application, some type of decision. Basically, they will send some data back, basically, so that Rflown is updated at that point with the approval or rejection, something like that, right? So this is now there is no user involved here, right? When the system is sending data to another system, there is no user involved here. So it's a system to system communication. Okay, system to system interaction or communication. The data is flowing between two systems or internet, basically. Okay. Now, so how does the systems, how do they make it happen, right? If nobody's sitting at the computer, nobody's doing any data entry, then how do they make it happen? So that's where the concept called web services or API. Okay. So this comes in the picture. So what they typically do is, so this bank, because Rflown needs to send some data programmatically, right, to this bank, credit application data. So this bank can expose some type of APIs. So they can expose some type of API or application programming interface, which Rflown can call over the internet. Okay, so that's how it typically works. And when the bank has to send the decision back, Rflown can expose a piece of code. API is nothing but a piece of code which is accessible over internet. Okay, so So this bank, when the Airflow wants to send some information, they will call bank's API or bank's web service. And they said they bundle the data and send it over the internet to the bank. Bank will interpret it. They have to do whatever they need to do. And whenever they are ready for decision, they will call the API exposed by Airflow, basically. And then they will basically send the decision back. Now this communication happens when they are calling these APIs, they can bundle the data into XML or JSON, and they can basically exchange the data, basically. So this is a very simple concept. Conceptually, it's just so they bundle the data and they send it to another system in either XML format or JSON format. Okay, because there is no user interaction. User interaction always happens in the HTML format. Okay, they cannot do it in XML or JSON format. It has to be in the HTML format. Okay, does this concept make sense? Does it make sense? I mean, any question on this one? Okay, so let's take a look at the definition of API now. So API is a application programming interface, right? And it's just what the API does is API exposes a software or expresses a software component, and it exposes its operations, what's the input, what's the output, and all those things. And it defines the functionality that are independent of each respective implementation, which allows definition, implementation. Now it's a complicated definition here, right? But essentially, it exposes the programming logic over the internet so that other program can call the whatever function they have exposed. Now, obviously, you guys learn every function in the programming world has some type of input, some type of output. So if Airflow is calling the bank's API, right, calling the bank's function, they need to know what function they are calling and what is the input. An input has to be in the XML or JSON format. And the output, once the program processes that, there will be some output, which will be in XML or JSON format. Okay, so that API will make that happen. Okay, so that's essentially in a nutshell in the definition of the API. You can summarize that. Some type of input, some type of output, and function basically exposed over internet. Okay. Now, when they are exposing over internet, specifically, they are called web services. These APIs are called web services. Okay. The web services can be implemented in different ways. There are two different technologies or two different ways you can create the APIs or web services. And they are based on different standards. Okay. So I think you probably will hear the term in the IT world a lot about SOAP and REST. You don't need to understand all the integrity and details of it, but you need to be able to test whatever the APIs they have exposed, make sure that those APIs are working as expected. That's where you come in as a QA. So we'll take a look at the SOAP-based, basically web services, how you can test it. Now, SOAP-based services are older versions. They came out long back initially, and it supports XML-based data exchange. Okay. Now, REST, which came out maybe after 5 or 10 years later than SOAP, basically, and it's getting very popular. It supports both XML and JSON data structures. Okay. So you have to send the input into either XML or JSON and interpret the output in XML or JSON. Okay. Any question on this? It's a general terminology. Get familiar. You need to be just familiar with it, what those are, and that's about it. Okay. Now let's take a look at the SOAP-based first, because it's XML-based. It doesn't add much complexity, so we'll just go and take a look at the SOAP-based services. Now, one thing here, coming back to the SOAP thing. Now, this diagram, right? Now, this is API. It is exposed over internet, right? So it's API. This, how do I know where to go and where this API is located, right? So they always, all the APIs are also, they also have a URL, okay? URL, just like Airflow, you have typing airflow.com. Each and every API is exposed over internet, and they have a URL which is uniquely identified at location over the internet. Okay, so we have airflow.com. This API might have www.jpmchase.com/whatever URL. Same thing, if Airflow exposes some API, it will have a URL, unique URL assigned, so that anybody on the internet can identify and call that those services. Okay, so just remember that it always has a URL. Okay. Whether it's a SOAP based or REST based, it will always have a URL. Okay, so there are a few things. So let's take a look at the SOAP based service and how we can go about testing and from our testing activities. So there are a few steps. SOAP based service. So first thing would be the visual file. That is very important for the SOAP based service, and I'll show you one example what it looks like. Okay, but essentially what it is like a service, right? It's a service. It has functions that are exposed through the service. It also has what is the input of the function, what is the output. So visual file defines all the functions and inputs and outputs. So it's more like a metadata. It's basically describes what is available in the service for other program to interpret and use it. Okay, so I'll show you one example of visual. It gets really complicated, but see if it makes sense. The second part is so visual will include operations as well, but you are testing specific operation. So you need to know what operation you are testing, what is the input of that, or what is the XML request or input, and what is the output or a response coming out from the operation. Okay, and finally, you will need to use a tool, because you're not going to be able to do just like typing in a browser and going somewhere. You have to use the tool like SOAP UI or Postman to actually call the operation, send your data in the XML format, and interpret the result in the tool. Okay, so let me start with a simple example, simple service, okay, which we all understand. So I sent you guys a bunch of URLs as well for different services in the email. I already sent you, so you should have it, but don't worry about it right now. Let me just go through this part first and see how what those are. Okay. Okay, so as I said, every service will have a unique URL, right? Just like a web application that you have. This is the URL, basically. So this is the web service URL. So somebody has wrote this piece of code and they have put it out on the internet for us to test it out or use it. So first thing you need to look at the WSDL. What is WSDL? What type of operations it exposes and what inputs and outputs are. Okay, so all the services you can type in question mark after the URL, WSDL. If you do that, then it will exposes the XML document. Okay, which is a big giant XML document. And as I said, good thing about it's an XML document. You can try to interpret it, see what it is, and so forth. But let me just show you some high-level components here. Okay, I'm always start from the bottom because that's part. Okay, so it says service name is a calculator. You always go to the bottom, okay, for the visual document. Then go from bottom to top. Okay, so service name is a calculator. There is a binding name is a calculator SOAP. So it is a SOAP-based service. That's what it's telling us. Then it has basically certain response and request objects. Okay, so this is coming out and in. So what is coming in and what is coming out? Those are two things as part of the. So there are two messages. So this is input and this is the output. That's what they have defined. Then they have a bunch of operations here: multiply, subtract, addition, and so forth. Okay. Now, as I said, this document can get really complex. And good thing is you don't even need to look at this document. Tools will help you a lot. Okay, so you don't worry about manually interpreting what these things are. Okay, but I'm just showing you just in case if you want to take a look at this type of document, what it is. So it is a service name. As I said, it will have function names. So these are functions, add, subtract, operations, right? That they are exposing, multiply, those four operations. And then you will have input and output. So every function will have some type of input and some type of output for that. Okay. So hopefully you guys know what service it is. It's a calculator service. And there are addition operation, there is a subtraction operation, multiplication, and divide. 4 operations there. Okay. So it has some description here. There are 4 operations, right? It says adds 2 integers. This is a web service, whatever testing, some documentation they provided. This now every operation has some type of input message, some type of output message. Okay. So I'm not going to spend much time on it. I'll let you guys when you guys get the URL, maybe take a look at it, see what it is, and so forth. Okay. All right, but we will go easier route of using the tool. All right, so how do I use this service? So first of all, I'm going to open up my SOAP UI part. You all have that installed, I think. It's all have up and running. So might take few minutes for the first time because it needs to do configuration and so forth. Okay, so first time when you open, you will have this startup page. You can just cancel it out. Okay, let me expand fully. Okay, now what type of service it is? For us, it's a SOAP-based service. So it's XML-based interpretation, right? So now going forward, I think all the tools you will use, they will look very similar. I mean, it has some type of project based work, right? A project is nothing but like organizing your testing activities and so forth. Okay. Now here, if you are testing a SOAP-based service, you will create a new SOAP project. Okay. So here we are testing a SOAP-based service. So I'm going to click on a SOAP. create the SOAP project, right? It will pop up this dialog box. Okay. Now here, it will ask you where is your WSDL, because WSDL describes all the operations and stuff. So it needs to know where that WSDL is located. And for that, it needs a URL. The same URL I sent you in the email. You can copy paste it right there in the initial WSDL box. Okay. So it will automatically put in the name as a calculator based on the service name, right? And it says here, create request. So it will create a sample test request for you. Okay, so this box is checked. It will, by default, it will be checked. So you don't have to do anything. We're not going to worry about test suites or anything. And no other change. So as soon as you copy this URL, you are good. You just click OK.
So for URL, do we need to mention the question mark and WSD?
The URLs I sent you already has a question mark.
Okay.
But otherwise, you will include the question mark if it's not there. Yes, yes. Okay. So now it interpreted the WSDL, and it basically identified the operations here. Now here you will see SOAP, different versions of SOAP. Okay. Generally, this is a 1 version, 1.0 or 1, and this is 1.2. You don't worry about that. You go with the whatever is the latest version for your testing. So let's go with the SOAP 1.2. And here are 4 operations that it pulled out. Let's see what we can do. And as I said, it will create a request for you, test request, so that you don't even need to manually add the request. But if you want to create a request, you simply click the operation, right click on it, and add a new request. Okay, so if I do that request to, I'll see the second request created right here, and it pops up this window for you. Now, let's say we don't have this, right? I'm going to close out this request. I'm going back with the request 1. So I'm double clicking it. This is where my testing starts. Okay, request 1. This is my test request. So I need to supply the test data and interpret the result. Now, let me explain you the SOAP part, okay, what this part is, so that you understand. So whatever you are saying in the request, because it's important to understand that part for your testing, so that you don't mess up. So it is, so what it does, it needs to bundle the data, right? And call when it's calling the service. So when you're bundling the data, so this is XML document, right? This is XML. It has 2 parts. One is a header, and second one is a body. Same as HTML, okay? But this is in XML now. So there is a header, and there is a body. Any metadata or any security information, any user ID passwords, typically you will supply in the additional tags here. User ID, password, those type of tags, you will see it under header. Any body, so any parameters you are sending to input for the operation, you will see under body tag in the SOAP. This is called, this XML is typically called the SOAP envelope. Okay, that's the name. This is the name you will see, SOAP envelope, and this is what it says here. This is the root, basically, of that XML, SOAP envelope. Okay, you see the SOAP envelope. It is actually practically written with that tag, SOAP envelope. Then you have SOAP header tag and SOAP body tag. Body tag is where your parameters will go for the operation. Okay. Header, if you have security related information, some encryption levels and all those things, then it will go in under SOAP header tag. Just like a HTML, you have a header and body, right? Head and body. Here you have a header and body, those 2 XML. This is how the envelope is structured. This is how it bundles the data, sends to the URL, and whatever results coming out, you will see on the right side. Okay. So for our purpose, we have 2 parameters. our service takes a function takes 2 parameters. These are identified by question mark. I don't know whether you can see it clearly or not, but it's a question mark here. Okay, so for calculator addition, what the test data would you use? 2 integers, okay, 4 plus 5, right? So if I run this request, in order to send this, I just created test data 4 and 5, and this is a green arrow that will actually initiate the request, sends to the server, and call the function. And then I should see results back here from the service. Okay, so when I run this, let's see what happened. No, there you go. So there is a raw and XML, different tabs. The raw will show you some raw format of XML, but we'll go to the XML, which is nicely formatted. And I see 9 coming out from the service. Okay, so this is the way you can test it. Now here, calculator function, right? Calculator, you know the logic, so you can write your test case. If I give you calculator service, can you write step-by-step instruction without having the requirements document? Generally, all the services will have a requirement document, and they will give you the logic as well, what they're supposed to do. Okay, but here, this service, you don't need a requirement document because you already know how whether it works or not. And you can come up with the same type of scenarios. What if I do 4 minus 5? What happens? What if I don't supply any values? Those are your test trees, scenario tree type of thing, right? If I run this 4, -5, what am I expecting? It's expecting -1, right? If I don't supply anything, what happens? Those are you still need to come up with those testing activities on your own. Okay? But this is the way you can test this type of web services. This is a SOAP-based service. Any question on the SOAP-based service testing? You understand the process, right? Well, what you do, what you go, how you do it, and so forth. So before I go to the other kind of service, let's practice a few SOAP-based service so that you understand how you can actually configure the tool, add those services, and test them. Any question before you guys do anything? Any question from anybody?
So we are changing the values, right? Can we save?
You are putting the test data.
Yeah, so are we saving this test data or like? It
No, you have your test case written down. You should have your test case written down in DevOps or somewhere.
Okay.
And yeah, when you execute, remember, this is execution activity.
Okay,
This is only test execution part.
okay,
But your planning activity still remains same. You need to create the document or detailed test case steps and document in DevOps or Word document, wherever, or Jira, whatever tool you use. And then somebody will go and execute simply, right? And they will compare the results, say when the service is ready, is it working as expected? Am I getting the results or not?
Think about it, right? When you run it, traditionally you've gone to the browser, put in the application URL and did that. Instead of using the browser to run the test case, you're running it
In the SOAP.
But then the whole purpose of being a tester is to test the system. Why?
This is the backend system.
This is backend part.
Backend testing.
Yep,
Okay.
this
So,
is backend
You have
testing.
to test whether the application API is working or not. So how are you gonna test it? This is the way you test it.
Yep, so remember this part in our example, we have exposed this API, our flow. We don't know who might be calling it. Could be bank or it could be somebody else, right? Maybe if there are 5 different banks who are using it, right? And they have to send the results back. If our service is not working, not updating the credit application status, then we are in trouble, right? So you will get a URL for this service, and then you will pass credit application data and see if you are getting the results back approved or rejected or not. Okay, in our hypothetical scenario, I'm saying. Okay, same way, I mean, there are thousands of services exposed on the internet. You will end up testing if you are integrating those services in your projects. And I think I have not seen any project lately that doesn't include any kind of web services. It's always there, no matter what company you work for.
So the email notification on the submission of credit.
That is the
application
different
will
part. That is a different component, right? That's the notification. That's nothing to do with the service. It just notifies you, hey, do you have a credit application? It doesn't have any details. This one will actually have, they can send the data, package the data, whole credit application data, and send to the third-party application, different application. In our example, we are just using calculator service, which is created by somebody else. Think of it as you are a tester, you know how the calculation works. Is that service working or not?
So can we use this calculator service for our loan calculation?
No, this is the different logic, right? It's a 2 + 2 is 4. Our loan calculation is a different calculation.
No, like not the same, kind of. these
Yeah,
certificates
similar.
like a bit-based.
Yep. So I mean, I sent you guys URL for temperature conversion. If you know temperature conversion, Fahrenheit to centigrade, right? There is a number conversion as well, number to words, basically. Okay, I like you guys to go through those as well and see how you can test those things, basically.
But these scenarios that you sent has got nothing to do with.
With
our-
Darflow. No, nothing to do with Darflow.
Just giving you a practice to practice on existing web services which already exist.
Yep, that's correct.
So in our loan scenario, what exactly do you think if you can? give
So
an
we can give
example?
expose the loan calculator, right? As a service, basically, which other people, because remember credit card, right? Validation part. Some bank is exposing that, not everybody doesn't know how to validate that. Only that company knows, so they can charge money for every transaction. That's where your money goes. When they say 2% or 3% fees, they will take it per transaction because they wrote the piece of code. So it's a service. Think of it, it's a service they are providing to 50 other or 500 other banks for credit card validations, and they're making money out of it.
If you have an SSN or something like that in order to check the validity of things.
Yeah, like a background checks, right? They do it. They call the government web services and they do that. Yeah, that's how they validate. Everything is via web services.
So AWS not web service,
AWS is a different kind of service.
It's a platform.
It's a platform infrastructure as a service. There are again, service is a service, right? Whether you go for a haircut, they are giving you service, right? And they have their menu item so that you can pick it. Same way, soap-based service as a Wisdom is the menu item. Think it that way, and you can integrate in your code whoever wants to use it. But you pay for every service. You pay for some money. So these guys will charge per transaction generally. That's how the services are set up.
So this Alpha system also has some APIs somewhere.
That is correct. That is correct. Which are not exposed, though, outside, basically. Yep. Okay. All right. So let's open up your tool. I sent you some service URLs. Let's do the calculator one first, and then pick one more after that. I think temperature conversion should be, those two should be good, and remaining two you can leave it for practice at home. Okay. So SOAP UI, everybody has it, right? Okay. But let me cover the REST-based service as well, and see what it is. It's a little bit different, works again, services are service, needs to have a URL. Without that, you cannot do anything, right? So let me quickly show you. So I sent you a couple of services in the email. So I'm going to pick one of the service. Let me pick universities by country. So by the name, hopefully you understand what they are trying to do here. A list of universities by country. So I'm going to paste that at the top. Now here, generally, they will give you the URL up to here. But in the documentation, they will say how to interpret this service or how to call this service and what parameters you can pass and what are the things supported. But generally in the URL for the service, so this is the actual service URL, and they will tell you the parameters that you can or how you can send your test data in. Okay, so you have to put the question mark generally for the service, and they will tell you, okay, country is equal India, something like that. It could be country equals Ghana, something like that. Okay, so this is how you can pass the parameters in. Bad thing about it is there is no wisdom. So you don't know what operations are there unless somebody tells you or some document gives you some documentation or so forth. You cannot just go in and interpret it. Let me just go to this service, see what they have exposed, and see if you get anything on there. Right? So this is just returning all the universities. There is nothing like a visual type of thing. Okay, it's returning some type of results. If I go on their website, if they put any documentation, then you will see it basically. So certain documentation. So here they have example. This is the way you can call a certain type of service. But again, you cannot expect this type of documentation for the services. So generally, they will give you 1 page or 2 page document. This is how you can call the service. Then these are the countries supported and so forth for this particular service. Okay. But again, you will need a URL, and this is how, if you want to pass the parameter, you have to put the question mark and then type in country equals India. If you have multiple parameters, some service will take multiple parameters, right? So you can put and city equals Bombay, something like that. Okay, so this is the typical format. Country equals India, that's one key name and value pair. Same thing, city and value pair. Okay, this is the question mark of the URL that starts the parameters. Okay, so that's the format that you generally should follow. Okay, but how do we test it in here, right? In the SOAP UI. Let me show you an example in the SOAP UI. Again, you will create a REST-based project because this is a REST service, and it has some format. See, it automatically shows some format here, right? I'm just going to simply paste. It's in the same format, right? This is the URL. This is the question mark, and after that is a parameter. Okay. Just I will say click OK, and boom. Here it will automatically interpret the URL. It will create a parameter here. So if you have to put different parameter, you can say Ghana here, right? And that's all. At this point, you can just go and execute. Okay, and see if it returns you the result. Okay. So it's still trying to execute. Let's see if it comes back with any error or not. I still got stuck somewhere. Hopefully it will time out after 30 seconds. Maybe they are not supporting that country, but those are some of the things that you will see. Okay. All right. All right, it got stuck on my machine somehow. Going to open another instance. Yeah, let me kill it. REST project. Okay, so when I put the parameter as India, it did return certain things, right? Okay. Now you can clearly see it's in JSON format. Okay, so by default, it returns all the information in the JSON format. So this is the main, it has multiple of these objects, right? For every university, they have this information. So it repeats for every university. So it has domains, whatever domain name is University of Petroleum Engineering Studies. Right, this is countries, what country it is, what is the web page, what is the state province, what is a 2-country code, and so forth. Now, as a tester, you want to make sure this whatever information is being written is correct. The list of universities that are coming back is that's what you're supposed to see. If there are 50 universities is returning, and you are seeing only 5, that means there is some issue in the query. Again, you need to know those details, okay, in order to test those data level thing. But here, so it's returning from different states as well, right? Certain states are not even there. Maybe they are online universities only, or something like that. Okay, but you need to know certain details in order to test it completely. So it needs to have some type of requirement document, just like Airflow, which they will give you, and you can run your test against that. Okay, but again, I just wanted to quickly show you how you can test the type of service. Okay, so it's again very straightforward, not complex like other one. Basically, and if you have another request, you can just create a new request and. Or say, let's say China University, whatever, right? So now here, I can open that. I can change the value to China and run it. Hopefully, it returns all the China's universities, and you can verify. Testing process does not change. Okay, you need to understand the logic. You need to verify what information is coming out is actually for China or somebody else, and verify.
What are the categories we can first, like country code, like do we have like anything like?
No, I think in this example, it is just a country.
Country.
Yes, so if I go back to their URL here, right? So it says search, name is equal middle and country is equal Turkey. Okay, so this is the name is equal middle and country. I'm just using the country field, basically. Because I don't know what are the different names they are supporting. That's the reason I'm not using it, but it needs to be in the document somewhere. Okay. Generally, they will provide you a document to read through, and you can come up with the testing activities based on that. Okay. Any question? I mean, this is pretty straightforward. TV series information. Okay. Let me just quickly show you this one. See if I can show the parameter. Okay, so this one, these guys don't even have a help type of thing over there. So here I'm supplying the name of the TV series. Okay, and it's returning the details. This is how it looks in the browser. You can call this type of service in a browser. But again, it looks ugly, right? In the tool will format it for you so that you can validate properly. So I'm going to copy that URL. And let me create a SOAP, or now I have a SOAP REST project, right? I can add a new, basically WADL location, which is nothing but the API location for REST. Okay, so I'm creating that. So give me exception. New REST service from URI. Okay. Okay. So I have a second service added here, right? Which is this one. And I'm sending in Sopranos as a name. And it's giving me all the details about Sopranos. who are the cast and when it was there, what country it originated, and all those things, right? Different TV shows, details about TV shows.
The first query is automatic, it comes automatically. I didn't do anything, but.
Which
the
query?
Sopranos, which.
No, because it already has a parameter in the query.
Oh, in the query, so that's.
Yes, that's why it's coming. But if you don't have parameter,
Uh-huh.
then it will throw you error. Where is the parameter? So that's where you are supplying the question mark, saying the parameter should be Q as Sopranos. Okay, and then it will pull the details about Sopranos. If you know any other source, what is
Friends.
friends? Yes, okay, let's see, Q equals friends. So it's pull up the details about friends, right? Here. So I changed Sopranos to friends. Let me see what detail they pulled up. Okay, so now I have details about friends. So it says friends, right? Here it's a comedy show. When it premiered, it gave you a detail about 1994. When it ended, 2004, all those things. What is it about? Some type of summary, and all those things. It has actually a lot more detail for Friends TV show. When it was airing and what timing and all those 9 years. Yep. But again, you as a QA, your job is to validate, make sure this information is showing up correctly, right? Whatever is pulling, it shows the data is correct or not. So that's where you need to have a requirement document, what's supposed to come out, all those details and so forth. Here you don't have those requirements document. Okay.
So when do we use REST and when do we use SOAP?
So the REST, again, both are standards for the web services. So it's used in the industry heavily. Now REST is the latest one. That's is used by, I think everybody's moving toward REST because the ease of use. I mean, testing wise, you don't need to know much details in configuration, and plus it's all the applications that we are building, it's built on the top of the REST. So they are even Airflow, different components layers, they are calling the business layer in the REST. They are building the whole everything as a service. Okay, so but sometimes it may not be exposed outside. This service somebody created, which is accessible anywhere in the world, but not Airflow one are not accessible anywhere. It's only available within the application. Those services you cannot test. Only developers can test. Okay, but anything that you are exposing for third parties, that's where you will test. So this is available anywhere. So you will have access to test these services. Okay, but SOAP is, I was working at my BMW client, they have thousands of SOAP services created. One service calls 5 different services, and that service calls another 50 different services. It's a service call within service call within service call, so it gets a lot of complication as well with the XML data. Okay. SOAP's RESTs are a little bit simpler to use. So if it goes back to the architecture, how somebody who is designing it goes back to that. Okay. But both are there, and they will be there for another 1,000 years or whatever.
So it can be example for the REST, like for instance, in this Friends scenario. So we have the requirements about the Friends show.
Yes,
so
Friends
once we bring up all the data that is visible here.
You have to go one line by line and validate all the data is showing up or not. Is that correct? Is it really from the Friends show or is pulling some other shows as well?
Okay.
So you have to make sure every element shows up properly with the correct information. Yeah, it gets complex. Yeah, this much information you have to validate. That means it's a lot of data. It's like credit application, right? You are saving it. Is it saving it? How do you know? You have to go in maybe in the database, and we'll talk a little bit about SQL tomorrow. That's where you go in the database and see out of 300 fields, is everything saved? You will not know, right? Yeah. Okay. Any question on this one?
Can we open up the calculator one in the REST project or do we?
No, you cannot, because that one is SOAP standard. This is the REST standard, so it only works with the REST. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you cannot open calculator. You can try, see what it does, but it should throw it out because it doesn't know what to do with the wisdom.
So with the SOAP standard, it should have a question mark and WSDL.
Yeah, that's how the
then
wisdom
like-
is, wisdom, because it's, you can see all the operations, it's a little bit organized. This one is less organized. Okay, because you don't know what operations are there unless somebody tells you this is how you can test it. Okay. If you don't have any question on the REST itself, let me show you one more tool, which you can play around at home, but I'm just going to show you quickly here. Okay. I think you guys installed, there's another tool called Postman. So what happened is like a SOAP UI was created originally for SOAP-based services only. Okay. But they added a REST testing feature later on in the SOAP UI, right? It's the name of the tool, which is for SOAP-based service testing. But they also added a REST-based testing capability, I think over last 2-3 years. Okay, but when the REST-based services came out like 10 years ago, SOAP didn't support that. So Postman was the tool. They initially came out for REST-based service testing. Okay, again, tools are tools. It's no-brainer, right? So you can create news just like that, HTTP request. This is where you create it and you specify the URL, right? I'm just pasting it. Now this tool is more friendlier for REST-based testing because you can do a little bit more. You can see a little bit more things. Let me click on send. Okay, and it gives you a little bit nicer format, nicer way here, right? You can say change the data from JSON to XML, right? So you can convert the format. So it will convert the information from JSON to XML, so certain things, outputs. But if it's JSON, then you will want to look at the JSON information. There's a preview feature as well. It will run in the background for one test and try to preview the result and so forth. But that doesn't look good here. So this pretty is the one that's you can see the raw how it comes, which is like a one-line type of thing. Yep, everything was stuff. This is how we saw in the browser as well, right? And so forth. Okay, so play around with this tool with the REST-based services. Again, these guys also added a SOAP-based service feature. Most of the companies here either use SOAP or Postman. So you need to get familiar with both tools. Again, they do the same one. Okay. Tools are tools, not much within the tool. Any question or anything what we talked today?
Can you please show again in the Postman where to put the URL?
Oh, in the Postman, you created a REST-based project. Did you create a REST project?
On the Postman?
Yeah.
No.
So make sure you create a REST project.
Oh, in Sophia?
Yeah, sorry, in the SOAP, sorry. Postman you're talking about, okay.
Open up a new.
Postman.
Yeah, so Postman, right? And you just click on new at the top, right? And then it will pull up a bunch of things, just ignore everything here. You need to create an HTTP request. Okay.
Oh, got it.
Yep, and then it will prompt you for URL. You just paste it, send it. Now, what we are testing is the get, which is the reading the information. Okay. Now there are 3 other operations: post, put, and delete. So similar to the CRUD one, right? Post is kind of like creating a new records. Put means updating, and delete means deleting a record. As a tester, most likely you will never test this. Developers will use these operations heavily because, as I said, I mean the whole layer, business layer, they can create in the web API or REST. So I'm not gonna go in details. This is what you will deal most 90% of the time get. So you don't have to change anything. paste your URL and send it, which will read the information and show it on the screen.
So is Postman only for REST? Or
No, it supports both. It supports both, but mainly used for REST, basically. It's very easy, user friendly for REST API testing. Because if you are security side, right, you can send in under authorization, some credentials right there. Everything is configurable, basically, here. Okay, so you can click on authorization, specify the parameters and so forth, if the service has it. Okay, so let's just quickly get done the rest one. If you wanna do it at home, it's fine. Basically, it would be fine, but it's pretty straightforward. Any question online? Anybody?
I have a question. As a manual tester, how much of this type of testing I would be doing? I believe there is a.
Probably, I would say maybe 10 to 20%, 10% service testing.
Would I be doing schema validations, all of that, or status codes? I mean, I don't want to deviate the topic, but.
Schema validation for what?
For the request, like, and see the.
You wouldn't, where did you validate schema? You never validate schema, right? It's a tool, it's generating the schema for you. And you are
In
just,
the requests, I could see in the JSON response, and like I can validate, right? The status codes and all.
yes. So I mean, if you are working
So
on
as a manual tester, how much of that I would be doing? Like, I know you said developers would use that, but like.
developers will generally do that, right? As I said, but if the services are exposed to outside world, typically QA will test it first after development. Because everybody will start integrating with your service. So they don't want to cause any issue. So QA has to test it.
Would that be a manual QA or like automation?
Yeah, testing will be done by the manual tester.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because they will give you requirement document and you will write your test cases against that and validate all the information that is generated by the service is correct.
That's what I'm getting as a result. And this was, I was expecting, right? So you have.
Thank you.
Yep.
The actual result.
It doesn't search it, it just needs to be
Right.
Right thing.
You have to cut and paste it into the.
All right, let's see.
DevOps, whatever the testing tool that you use.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have any parameters.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It
Right?
doesn't have such parameters.
So it just lists out all the flights for the US. Now look at the dates here, departure date. So it's just static data, probably. They are returning the same results.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that's, you probably want to avoid that then. You can just want to see it, but it doesn't have any parameters.
Yeah,
So
just listing it.
just listing it out, yeah. Yep. But it has all the flights, which was on 2016-120. 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's not listing current information.
So in this, if we need to put in some other values for key, how do we know what values to put for key? And
So that's why you need a requirement document, what is supported, what countries are supported, right?
Mm.
And as they add more and more countries, they will keep on updating the requirement document. Yep. I just picked the major countries, India, China, so they had it over there. All right, any other question? If not, then I think we are almost at the time, so we can wrap up otherwise. I'm hoping you all have a SQL Server installed. Make sure you install it, download and install. I sent you guys URL, right? Where to download? Yes, we'll need it tomorrow. If not, then Thursday, we will see how fast we go for that.
Like arrange for another computer.
I have a question with the SQL Server installation.
Uh-huh.
And one is
So should I close that window that I got after clicking successful? The reason I'm asking is, do I need a connection?
Just close it. I mean, you have to close the windows after once you install successfully.
Because I asked him.
So I don't need those details like for the connection.
No, we will talk tomorrow.
install now, right?
I mean, we'll have a sample database so that you can practice. So that's.
Can I share my screen, please?
Yes, go ahead. Yep.
So for SQL, SQL 2019. And then the SSM.